Well, good morning. It's Wednesday again, if you're joining us live, and if you're joining us later watching the replay, hello, whatever time it is. I'm Scott Simmie. I'm the editor-in-chief of DroneDJ.com, and we're going to go clockwise here. Yifei Zhao is a regular panelist and contributor to Drone DJ. Bruce Crumley in France is senior editor on Drone DJ, and Ishveena Singh in India is also a senior editor with Drone DJ. So welcome everyone, and let's jump right in. There's been some news that came as a bit of a surprise to me. I don't know about you, but it's the DJI Mini SE, which is sort of their budget packaging of the original Mavic Mini, and it's now being sold in the US. Now, what's surprising about this is that DJI originally said it had no plans, although there might have been a qualifier at this time, to sell that product in the US. Ishveena, you wrote the story. Tell us where it's available, what it costs, and why it's available in the US now, if you know.
Yeah, so there was this, will they, won't they kind of a guessing game going with DJI, because the first time that we saw, an inkling that a product like Mini SE special edition drone would be coming was through a Walmart listing, and it was listed on the US site. So, we always thought that it's going to debut in North America, but that never happened. It actually debuted in Southeast Asian markets, and we contacted DJI at that time, and they told us that much, that there were no plans to, release this product in the matured markets like North America and Europe. And they were only probably targeting a market like Russia when it came to these matured markets. So yeah, it is really surprising because, 1 month after the product is out in the wild, it has finally arrived to US customers. And right now also it's not available through DJI's official online store. It is available on Walmart and Best Buy. But yes, it's a sub 250 gram, sub $300 product. So we can expect a lot more people to start flying drones now.
Yifei, you've flown the Mini when it first came out, and you've flown the Mini 2, and you've flown pretty much every other drone that's available in North America by now, I'm sure. What are your thoughts on the Mini SE and at that price point? Who do you think it's going to appeal to, and do you think there are going to be some pretty good numbers for this product?
There's definitely a separate market for it, for sure. I believe the typical customers who would consider the Mini 2 or vlogging, need a little better quality and reliability for their camera, they will probably go for the Mini 2. But there's definitely the separate market, as Ishveena mentioned, from Best Buy, from Walmart. It's just a different clientele, right? And that's always DJI's tactics, is trying to cover as much of the lower end market as possible. So I definitely see that there's a demand for customers wanting to spend even just $50 less just to buy a slightly cheaper product.
Now, Bruce, I'm going to put you briefly on the spot with a question we probably don't have the answer to, but why do you think DJI might say, hey, this is not going to be available in the United States, and then a month or two later, here it is? Do you think it was perhaps just a change of corporate plans, or do you think that might have been, for some reason, some sort of strategy?
Well, maybe it reflects the logic of the ad that used to be on when I was a kid, the Heinz ketchup ad that used to be on with the kids, where this big bottle of ketchup was over a hamburger, and then someone was singing anticipation, it's making you wait before it plops out on the burger and you can finally eat the thing. It might be that to have a lot of people who were really eager to buy the DJI drone, that were kind of waiting, and saw these things being launched in foreign markets and say, this is drag, man. I want to get my hands on that. And it looks like we're not going to get, be able to get it. And then lo and behold, they can. And I imagine the response would be, by anybody who's interested, immediate and rather massive. We'll see. But I have the feeling if that's the case, it probably had something to do with that kind of psychological thinking. The other possibility, but I doubt it's true, it may also be that given its, let's say, somewhat delicate PR management in the U.S. just now, it may have said, let's not wave the flag until we're really ready to go.
Sticking with DJI, Ishveena, you had a story today that the company has announced plans to close its flagship store, which I seem to recall from your story is like 10,000 square feet, based in Hong Kong. I've been to their flagship store in Shenzhen. I've been to DJI in Shenzhen, and when I was actually flying out of Hong Kong, they actually have a display, including a flying cage, at the Hong Kong airport. So while you're waiting for your flight, you can pick up DJI products. To me, this came as a bit of a surprise because DJI likes to be showy. These stores are really very impressive. They're beautifully designed. They're kind of like a very high-end Apple store. Any thoughts, Ishveena, on what might be behind the decision to give up that property?
You're absolutely right. These stores are beautiful, they're immersive, and there are only a handful of them. I mean, there are none in North America or Europe. It's only confined to Asia. So yes, it's really sad to see, that one of them is going away. But DJI probably has been suffering from a lack of, foot traffic in Hong Kong, because even before there was coronavirus-induced lockdowns and, the retail activity shut down in general all across the world, Hong Kong in 2019 suffered from, mass protests. There were widespread protests, and because of that also tourism also kind of declined in the country. So in all probability their sales have been suffering. And let's not forget, where the store is located is one of the most expensive retail strips in the world. So it can't be easy for them to keep on paying rent month after month when the sales are just not picking up.
Well, I'm disappointed I never got a chance to check out that particular store, but it was quite something to see them in the airport. All right, we're going to move on now to drone delivery, but a different style of drone delivery. We had a story a little over a week ago about an attempt to deliver contraband to a prison in Canada, and we mentioned that briefly at the time, but we didn't really get into the broader topic. Bruce, I know you've done a little more digging into some of the things that are being delivered and how frequently they occur. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I kind of jumped on the back of your story and updated a little bit. It's interestingly, a lot of the press on this is coming out of Canada. I don't know why. I mean, based on the numbers, anecdotal numbers you see, but numbers nevertheless, Canada seems to, probably not be suffering from this any more than, say, European countries or the U.S., but it seems to be a lot more worried about it. And people flying in, cell phones, drugs, tobacco, weapons, things that are improvised weapons like screwdrivers, things like that. So, and apparently there's a boom economy. Also, given that COVID has really slashed the number of in-person visits that people can make to relatives who are inmates, the opportunity to pass actual contraband physically between people has been cut a lot. So drones kind of arrive as a logical solution, I would suppose. As your story noted, Canada is installing a very limited number of radar systems to detect drones around prisons. The state of Victoria in Australia has spent about $500,000 to install really sophisticated systems that can see drones coming from 50 kilometers off, alert guards and when they come too close to the penitentiary, and then scramble out to the yards and exposed areas to wait for any deliveries. The system can also track backwards and find out who's controlling them and send cops to pick them up. So it's we'll have to wait and see if the Australian experiment succeeds, and if so, how many other countries follow suit.
One of the early drone detection systems is built by DJI, and it's called the Aeroscope. And I may have the numbers slightly off, but I remember writing a story about the Aeroscope before. In fact, in this case, it was used at the Abbotsford International Air Show in Canada, Western Canada. And it was used in conjunction with the RCMP and obviously the people who were controlling the airspace. And it was able to detect both drones and the location of the pilot of the drone from up to 25 kilometers away. And I guess, when you can get a system like that, my recollection is it was like 17,500 or something along those lines. When you get something for that sort of price, you kind of think, why wouldn't these or similar systems at similar price ranges be at every single prison? Now, Yifei, I'm not sure if you've got an immediate answer to that, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. But any thoughts? Do you think it's just lack of knowledge that such systems are available at that price? Any idea?
I actually do because I investigated into this. We were hoping to get one because I mean we have a 70-acre flight field just 20 minutes from Toronto. Right, so that's pretty close to the largest city in Canada, and the challenge for us is it's actually a super scenic spot. So photographers like to wander around the corner of the property where it's public road and take pictures. And traditionally they come. It's actually a golden hour spot where the sun sets just behind the hills. So a lot of photographers would come at the corner of the road and take time-lapse photographies until drones came out. So we started noticing drones that are not part of our operations or students and started flying over the property, which is kind of an intrusion to us. Logically, we thought the Aeroscope was great if we can get our hands on. At least we can run our own little drone airport, so to speak. We can control, because I believe one of the functions is not just tracking. You can actually control who you allow to take off and land. So with some R&D activities on site, we thought that would be perfect. So we can know what's the altitude and we can separate the airspace layers to basically do collision avoidance. Official from one of the major dealers of DJI in Canada. Apparently, DJI is not selling them in North America. So we don't know what happened. We don't know if there are legal concerns for whatever reason. But a year after the release of the product, they're not allowed to sell them. So the dealers are not allowed to sell them in Canada and basically entirely over North America. And there hasn't been much news about the product. Right, a couple of years after it was released. So I'm not sure what happened. I believe it was proven to be very effective because I think one of the missions was the Niagara Police also took a unit in their cruiser and they drove around, especially with Niagara Falls is so close to the U.S. border. They actually drove around and they were able to identify different DJI pilots. So we don't know why it's not being available, but I'm hoping that it would be in the near future and we can get our hands on one.
I'm going to stick with you for a second because the thought occurred to me as you were describing your operations. And it's true, you're often testing newer drones and maybe some things you don't really want the public to take a look at. So the question is really, what are your options? If someone is standing just outside the property line and they're flying within visual line of sight and they're in uncontrolled airspace, what options do you truly have if you don't want, a drone intruder near where your operations are taking place?
Legally speaking, I mean, it is a 70-acre site. So in Canada, if their drone is keeping the distance from people on the ground, right? So if they fly where no one is standing on the site, there's nothing we can really do about them. They can legally fly over. For us, I mean, we're neighboring to farm fields and empty lots. That's part of the reason why we're there, so we get tons of space to fly around. But also, we have good relationship with the neighbors, and we don't fly over their properties unless it's absolutely necessary. So there's the difference between what you can do legally versus what you should do ethically. And usually for us, if we're flying frequently at a property, we don't go over the boundaries, even though we're allowed to, just because it's not like we're flying one-off mission, right? No one's going to appreciate a drone flying around their property. It doesn't matter if it's legal or not. And that's been a question that's been popped by a lot of people online in both Canada and States, because the high camera quality on the drones and the typical lower altitude than a traditional manned aircraft, you can see a lot from the ground level. Right, and that's out of the hands of any civil aviation or Transport Canada agencies. It's more about the privacy commission. So are they intruding, and what are they doing with the footage? I mean, if they're just seeing from the air, they aren't doing anything. At that point, it's still intrusion of privacy. I don't know. I mean, those would be questions. So again, I think those are along the lines of being ethical versus being legal.
I'm going to get to Bruce and Ishveena on a separate topic in just a minute. But while we were on this whole drone detection and drone countermeasure discussion, it reminded me of a brief story that I wrote this past week, which was about the availability on Amazon of a drone jamming gun. It was listed at $5,800 US, and I'm like, that can't be legal. That cannot be legal. And of course, it's not legal to just sell products like that. I mean, it may be legal to sell them, but it's certainly not legal to use them. In Ontario, for example, you can buy a spearfishing gun and possess it, but you are not permitted to use it. So one of those strange things with the law. In this case, I think some people might have a misconception that, oh, well, you know, at prisons or wherever, just put up something that can jam their signal by interfering with the command and control link and disable the drone and bring it down to the ground. But there are, in fact, very, very strict laws that prohibit the sort of willy-nilly projection of these sorts of frequencies that can mess up all sorts of things, people's Wi-Fi systems, radio transmissions, et cetera. And that's why we have, you know, an actual department of government, as do most countries, that is in charge of allocating frequencies and legislating what you can do on those frequencies. So I suspect the drone gun may not get too many buyers in North America or anywhere else. And it reminded me that one of the massive Chinese retailers was actually fined or threatened with a fine for putting some of these devices on display. So if you're tempted to go and order that $5,800 drone gun on Amazon, please don't, and you can thank me later. All right, we're gonna get back to you, Ishveena. Can you just remind us about a story you wrote a few weeks back about terns and tern eggs and their nests, and what happened and why?
So this was a case of wildlife harassment at the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve in California. About 1,500 tern eggs, which were being incubated, were abandoned by the birds because in a span of 1 week, 2 drones crashed in the reserve back to back. And while there was disturbance from the drones crashing themselves, then people, the owners of the drones, came on to find those machines and caused further chaos for the birds. And they never came back. The birds never came back. And it was a very jarring visual because the reserve, released these photographs which show the eggs, deteriorating there, and some of them broken also. And that kind of spurred on response from many other reserves, which have tightened the rules now about whether the drones should be allowed to fly around such spaces or not. They are not legally anyway, but somehow DJI geofencing was not showing a no-fly zone around that time. I remember somebody posted that on Twitter showing that area, that it was not in the no-fly zone, and I'm not sure why that was.
And Bruce, you also had a story this week that was somewhat related, because in this case, if I'm recalling this correctly, a drone actually captured some wildlife harassment being carried out by someone else. Can you tell us what that story was?
Yeah, a couple of friends in Australia who scan and go out and check out the beach all the time. They live close to the beach. Were out and noticed some bait lines offshore, and so one of the friends got in his jet ski and zoomed out there, and the other one flew his drone to take it all in to see what happened. And what they found were 5 different sharks. And I don't know if they were all bull sharks, but one of them was a bull shark. And the guy on the jet ski, I mean, the reports out of Australia said he circled the shark a few times, and in fact, what he does, I mean, didn't see the full video. I only saw what were in the various uses or cuts of that full video. So I'm not going to accuse the man of anything unless I see more of it. But what I did see was more of a rodeo riding style horse cutting out cattle kind of maneuvers and getting in front of the shark, a bull shark, as it was trying to get away and heading it off at the pass and cutting it back in. And there was actually one part of that sequence in which he kind of pins the shark in very shallow water between the sea and the beach. And I was kind of astonished because I was, shark videos are very popular, drone videos of sharks, but usually they're popular because they allow us to delve into that weird thing humans have of loving to imagine ourselves harrowing situations there are. And fully drink in the horror of it all, but be it as distant, it's somebody else's problem anyway. So it's kind of entertainment, right? I mean, I'm not going to die. So, and in this case, I was looking for something that people might relate to and be interested in, and instead what I saw was a case that looked like, again, I will not accuse the guy, but it certainly looked like flagrant wildlife harassment that then was cheered by this Australian news crew. Kind of came up and look at this guy. He's a great guy. He, stood up to a bull shark, and all he got for his, all he got away with was a couple of tooth marks in his jet ski. So I just thought it was kind of another call, reminder to people that animal harassment's a real problem, especially wildlife harassment. And if you think about it, not flying drones around wild animals should be kind of a no-brainer. I understand what the allure is. You want to get close to animals, and you've got a camera on this drone. But if you think it through a little bit, it's really a terrible idea.
It reminds me, while we're on the topic, it reminds me in the early days of drones in particular, you would often see videos online where people were taking their drone, an FPV product, and they were flying onto like wildlife reserves and getting as close as they could to lions or alligators, and sort of the money shot was hoping that these animals would respond and leap up toward the drone, because it's actually very dramatic to look at, but it's really not so cool for the animals involved at all. And of course, we've also probably seen some videos of people who get very close to birds of prey. I've seen some videos shot at a very respectful distance. And in fact, one of them we wrote about this past week, a guy who was basically brand new with a DJI FPV drone. It was his fourth flight with the drone, and he went out to an area in eastern Toronto. And sure enough, soon after he took off, there was a hawk flying. And this guy did a great job because he maintained a really good distance. He was able to orbit and keep an eye on the creature without interfering with it. But we've seen other videos online where people will deliberately, when they see birds, it's like, wow, let me see how close I can get to the bird. And I suspect at that moment, in their mind, they're just thinking, wow, this could be a really cool shot, without thinking about the consequences or the fact that many birds of prey will come along and literally try to grab your drone. And of course, you're risking injuring the creature's, the creature. Yifei, we don't see, thankfully, as many of these kinds of videos online. I haven't looked recently, but I don't think we do. As we used to. Do you think the message is getting out there? And what would your message be to a student, because you're an instructor as well, to a student who said to you, hey, I'd love to go and get some really close shots of that moose?
So I guess first of all, I have an input from my filming background. A lot of the cool shots you see in film or in actual scripted productions, they're handled by animal handlers. I remember I coordinate them to rent a bear from BC, Canada, to actually ship it over to Toronto for a KFC commercial, and it costed like $20,000-$30,000 just to rent a movie bear for a day. So those are typically very professional videos, and the animal handlers, spend the time. There are actually all sorts of rules what you can or cannot do. So it takes experience and work to know how to film actually around animals. Drones plus social media, I guess, just give people possibilities of doing stupid things, right? It's one of the possibilities that's given by technology. It doesn't make people smarter, for sure. So I think my take would be, number one, for students, don't do that. Don't get too close to the animals, especially if you're just starting to fly drones. Your control of the unit is probably not that great if you're trying to get away or reorient your drone when you are flying. So don't get too close to the animals. And I know in Canada, the national parks, provincial parks, right, there's all the requirements of not flying the drone unless you get specific permission from the park authority. And there are lots of tourists who complain about that. But along this line, I think that's actually a good thing because you actually don't want to unnecessarily disturb the animals, especially when you don't intend to, when you don't know better. The other line I had is actually related to hunting, because there were quite a few hunting videos, right, and hunting stories of using drones. I know specifically in Canada, it's not allowed to hunt using drones. And I actually looked into this last year. So there are a bunch of other hunting rules. So for example, if you arrive at a hunt site, you can't hunt for at least 24 hours. You have to give the animals what's called the lead time, right? So you can't have unnecessary advantage over the animals. So there are tons of different rules around hunting and wildlife management. Definitely recommend people do their homework and apply common sense if they have any.
All right, so we began the day by talking about DJI, and we're going to close the day by talking about DJI. And I had a story yesterday, actually. We had a source contact us with some information about the Mavic 3 Pro and its planned release date. When someone contacts you and gives you information, we don't just go with the information. It was a number of back and forth emails until I was satisfied that this person actually did have credible knowledge and wasn't just kind of spoofing us. But essentially, we originally thought that the 3 Pro was going to be released either in Q3 or Q4 of this year. The latest we heard from a source, well, not the latest, the penultimate latest we heard from a source in China was that it was going to be released probably in October. The latest information we have is that this date in October 15th, which is actually my birthday, is the day when DJI plans to finalize the final design of the Mavic 3 Pro. It's been working with prototypes, and then it takes about 2 months of full-on production before the product is released into the wild. So this source, who I believe to be very credible, says it will be in January, but cautions that if there are any other things that get in the way, of course, the Lunar New Year celebrations are in February, and that is, the biggest kind of mass migration of people in the world takes place in China, and everything shuts down for 1 to 2 weeks. So if they don't have it fully ready to go in January, then it probably won't be until after Lunar New Year. Yifei, I'm wondering from your perspective, who do you think the Mavic 3 Pro is designed to appeal to? Is it the regular drone pilot? Is it professional? Is it prosumer? Who do you think?
It will be interesting to see the lineup of the Mavic 3, because if we compare that with Mavic 2, you've got the Mavic 2 Pro, and then there's the Mavic 2 Zoom, and then there's the Enterprise line with Mavic 2 as well. So definitely interested to see if it's just the Mavic 3 or if there's a Mavic 3 Enterprise line as well. But along, who this is for, I think right now DJI probably has about, in large, probably 3 tiers of their customers, right? So the entry level that usually gets the Mavic 2, the Mini 2 usually gets the Mini 2 or the Air 2S. And then your sort of middle filming level or the sort of jack of all trades, people who get the Mavic 2 Pro or even the Phantom 4 Pro, and they can run a variety of operations. It has a decent camera. They can install third-party software if they want to run some customized survey missions as well. And then sort of your top tier, which is the full either the Enterprise or the full Inspire 2 with the whole set. So that's sort of the 3 tiers, and I would see Mavic 3 being for that middle tier. I know from my team is we've had the Mavic 2, we had a few Mavic 2 Pros, and we had those, for a few years since they came out. So when Mavic 3 comes out, it's definitely something we're looking forward to get. We suspect that there's going to be a much improved camera, especially we have the Inspire 2 with the raw set as well. So to us it's either the Mavic 2 Pro or the Inspire 2 depending on the project. But when Mavic 3 comes out, we're really looking forward to just combine the 2 drones with just the one Mavic 3, because Inspire 2 never really got an upgrade. So it's a much older drone as well.
Fast final question for you, and I'm going to stick with Yifei on this one. So we're told that this will have a micro 4/3 Hasselblad camera. Would you anticipate that they would put interchangeable lenses on this, or do you think that's something they would reserve for the Inspire 3 if and when it comes?
We're hoping. There's the hope it's going to have interchangeable lens, but I guess we just have to see what ends up coming out. I think this past couple of years with COVID, product availabilities has been challenging. So there's what DJI or what the customers want, and then there's reality. So I guess we'll find out.
Well, another super interesting panel. I appreciate everyone's participation today. It's amazing how time flies when you're talking about drones, because we're at the 30-minute mark. So Yifei Zhao, Bruce Crumley, Ishveena Singh, thank you very much. I'm Scott Simmie, Editor-in-Chief of DroneDJ, and we'll see you all next Wednesday at 10, or if you can't make it live, and we understand plenty of people are working and have other commitments, please do tune in later. And if you are tuning in later, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.